Hi, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name's Dan, and today I'm going to be ranking my top 10 favourite TV shows of all time. Now, before I even get into this list, there are a few ground rules to establish. One of them is that I haven't seen every TV show ever. Another one is that these are just my personal picks. It's going to be probably a bit of a weird list because you're going to have some critically acclaimed films, followed by some probably not very critically acclaimed films, and some of the not very critically acclaimed films might rank above the critically acclaimed films because it's just my personal subjective list. The actual list itself, the top 10, is pretty cemented, the actual 10 shows, but their placement on the list is not cemented because basically every time I rewatch a show like this, they move up and down the list depending on how each rewatch goes. So things that are at number 7 might move up to number 5, and things that are at number 10 might move up to number 6, and all that kind of stuff. But roughly, this is my list, so let's get into it. So at number 10, I'm going to be starting off the list with Freaks and Geeks, which is a show that I've only actually seen once. I watched it maybe a year ago or 2 years ago. It's very up my alley. It was created by Judd Apatow, and it stars Seth Rogen, James Franco, Martin Starr, Jason Segel, all before they were famous. This is like 1998, I believe, or 1999, like late 90s, before they were like, I don't think any of them were famous at this point. Seth Rogen's like 16 in it, you can barely even tell it's him, it's ridiculous. But yeah, it's like a high school TV show. Linda Cardellini's really good in it as well, and John Francis Daley. And yeah, it tells the story of the nerds and the bullies essentially, and how they're kind of more connected than maybe they want to admit. It's not as much of a comedy as you'd think. I mean, it is funny, but it's not like a traditional sitcom. It's not like a 20-minute comedy, you know. It's like a 45-minute dramedy where it's very like coming of age kind of stuff, and there's quite a lot of progressive storylines as well. Like, it was weird seeing Seth Rogen in season 4 of Big Mouth where he dates a trans girl, because he did that same thing, that same storyline with Seth Rogen like 20 years ago in Freaks and Geeks, which at the time, like, that is such a progressive storyline to be telling 20 years ago, and it wasn't like derogatory, it wasn't pejorative, it was literally just very open, very accepting of this trans character, which, yeah, for 1999, very ahead of its time. It's got a lot of deep themes in there. The only thing is there's only one season of it. You know, it probably could have got higher if it had ran for a few seasons, but it got cancelled early, which is a theme in this video, unfortunately. And yeah, but the one season that we got is really good. I even watched it out of order by accident because I watched it online when I watched it, and the last 2 episodes were switched around, so I actually watched the last episode, and then I watched the episode before that chronologically, and so I was like, oh, okay, that didn't really flow well, but okay, where's this going? And then I went to watch the next episode, and it said that I'd already watched it. So a bit of a weird viewing experience for me, but I do love Freaks and Geeks. Definitely check it out if you're a fan of Judd Apatow's work. Like I say, it's not an out-and-out comedy. It is a lot more dramatic than a lot of sort of straight sitcoms, but definitely give it a go. I think you'll like it. At number 9 is going to be Breaking Bad. Now, this is what I mean by it's a weird list, because Breaking Bad at number 9, you're probably thinking, well, what the hell's at number 1 then? I'm telling you now, Breaking Bad's the best show on this list. It's just not my personal favourite. I've watched it twice. I watched it once when season 5 was airing in like 2013, I think it was, or 2014, something like that, and then I watched it again this year, and yeah, it's probably the best written show, and maybe the best acted show I've ever seen. There's a couple of shows I haven't seen. I've never seen The Wire, and I've never seen The Sopranos, but I've seen a lot of the big shows, you know, your Game of Thrones, your Sherlocks, your Daredevils, your Fireflies, your all them kind of things, and this, for me, Breaking Bad is just the creme de la creme. It's so good. It's impeccable. It's untouchable. It's just ridiculously good. But it's very heavy, it's very dark, and so it's not a show that I really rewatch all the time. Like, I never really just think, oh, I'm in the mood for a bit of Breaking Bad, I just stick on a random episode. No, if I'm going to watch it, I'm going to watch the entire show over the space of a few weeks. And like I said, I've done that twice in the last 6 or 7 years. It is a brilliant, brilliant show, but it's not got the highest rewatch factor for me personally. But I do love it. I mean, it's such a well-written story about a chemistry teacher who has to learn to fucking sell drugs, cook and sell drugs to provide money for his family, and then you just see his slow decay over the course of 5 seasons, and it's such a gradual thing that you don't even realise when you're watching it. Like, the first time I watched it, even by the end, I was like, no, Walter White, like, I was behind his every decision, and then I watched it again, you know, this year, and I realised after about maybe like season 3 or something, I'm like, nah, you're actually kind of the villain in this, which it was so over my head the first time I watched it. Like, I wasn't mature enough to really be understanding, like, because that is the whole point, is like, you're kind of meant to root for Walter, but at a certain point you do realise, okay, I can no longer condone his actions. But the first time I watched it, they did such a good job of wanting, you know, making me want to root for him, that I just condoned all his actions. But this time I was like, okay, no, he definitely is a villain at a certain point. And it's cool how he goes from being kind of the moral compass to the villain of the show, whereas Jesse goes from being this kind of like burnout druggie to then he becomes the moral compass of the show, and they have like opposing character arcs that cross paths. And yeah, just everything about the show, the villains, the writing, the cinematography, the soundtrack, the direction, the performances. I mean, I've never ever seen a TV show with performances this good. I'm pretty sure Bryan Cranston was at least nominated, if not won, the Emmy every single year that Breaking Bad is on TV, and he deserved it. I've never seen a better performance in any TV show. Aaron Paul deserves a lot of credit as well. It's also surprisingly funny for a show that's as dark as it is. I would say there are certain episodes which are borderline comedies. Like I said, when I was rewatching it, particularly the early stuff, like season 1, season 2, quite a lot of comedy in there, particularly with Jesse and his friends like Skinny Pete and Badger. But there's one episode where Jesse gets a house, and then there's like a few scenes where it's just Skinny Pete and Badger playing Xbox and just chatting shit about like Star Trek and stuff. And it's so fucking funny. Like there's no real point for it to be there, but it just the levity helps balance out the darkness, I think. I guess that's kind of what keeps it watchable, because if it was just the dark stuff without any levity, it would be a really difficult watch. But luckily Vince Gilligan finds that right balance. Coming in at number 8 is going to be Firefly. Now Firefly I've also only seen one time, and honestly if I rewatched Firefly it could go up a lot. I mean, I fucking loved Firefly when I watched it. It's been a couple years. I do need to revisit it, but from what I remember of Firefly, it was fucking awesome. And I know you could say, well, why didn't you rewatch it for this video? But honestly, there was about 15-20 shows in contention. I can't be rewatching every single show that's in contention. But Firefly is a brilliant show. I think it's got like a 9 out of 10 on IMDb. It's a weird show because on the one hand I want to say it's underrated, but on the other hand, like I say, it's got a 9 out of 10 on IMDb. Those who have watched it love it. Like, I don't know anyone that's watched Firefly and it isn't one of their favourite shows. But at the same time, a lot of people, I feel like everyone's heard of it, but not a lot of people have checked it out. And maybe that's because there's only one season. But don't let that fool you, because the one season thing is no indicator of the quality of the show. It's all to do with the way that Fox aired it. They aired it all out of order, and then people didn't respond to it because they aired out of order. They even so there's 14 episodes, and I think 3 of the episodes never even aired. And so people just didn't really respond to it at the time that it aired, and then it came out on physical media and people watched it chronologically, and then they were like, oh, this is sick. But by that point they cancelled it. There is a movie though. The good news is if you watch the show and you love it and you're like, oh no, why did they cancel it? There is a movie called Serenity which wraps everything up. But yeah, it's about this crew. Basically think Han Solo. You know, the main character is called Malcolm Reynolds. He's essentially a smuggler. The show takes place 500 years in the future, and the Earth's population has outgrown Earth. You have the core planets, which are called the Alliance, which is basically the government, and then you have sort of the outer rim planets and stuff, and Malcolm Reynolds just has his crew and his ship, and they just fly around, they do missions, they commit like train heists, and they run away from the Alliance, and they pick up like passengers along the way. And it's just about the dynamic between all these 9 characters. These 9 main characters, every single one of them is memorable, every single one of them is relevant. They're all so like defined and different. They play off each other so well. Like, I can't think of a single show, even including Breaking Bad, where the chemistry Breaking Bad, where the chemistry between the main characters is this good. Like, every single character just bounces off each other so well. Partially it's because of the way it's written, but partially it's just because they cast the perfect person for every role. Like, I can't imagine anyone but Nathan Fillion playing the role of Malcolm Reynolds. Everyone's great. I mean, I love Wash, Alan Tudyk. I love Kaylee. You know, fucking everyone, just everyone's so great. Malcolm Reynolds is probably one of my favourite characters ever written, I would say. Later. Alright, Matt, this is just for you, but I realised when I was talking about Firefly that I forgot to mention something, so I'm just going to say it now, but can you splice it in? Cheers. It also shows how good Firefly is that Nathan Fillion, who plays Malcolm Reynolds, has supposedly watched the show like 10 times himself, which actors very rarely watch things they're in, because I've heard actors say it's like looking through baby photos, and I could just you just wouldn't really watch stuff you're in, would you? You might watch it once. But yeah, he said he's watched the show like 10 times. So if you can watch a show that you're in that many times, it just must be awesome. I feel like this show was Joss Whedon's like magnum opus, and it got taken away from him, which is just so unfortunate. But you know, the fans, the browncoats, they did ride together. They got the film made to wrap up all the loose ends. So you do kind of have a complete story there. But unfortunately, it's just you just left wanting more, which shows how good the show is. And it also shows how good the show is that I haven't watched it for a couple of years, and yet it's still number 8 on this list. But like I say, if I were to rewatch it, which I am planning on doing soon, I really reckon it could climb a few places up this list, because Firefly is awesome. It's funny, it's got action, it's got heart, it's just got everything. It's brilliant. Alright, number 7, we've got Gavin and Stacy. Yes, I'm placing Gavin and Stacy 2 places above Breaking Bad. That's just my list. For my American viewers, I don't even know if you guys have heard of Gavin and Stacy. I've got no idea if it's made its way over to the States. Obviously, you know who James Corden is, but before he was James Corden doing his late night show, his carpool karaoke and stuff, he was just a small-time writer and comedian, and he wrote this show with Ruth Jones called Gavin and Stacy, which is based on a couple that he knew, basically about a couple who met on the phone, and they lived in completely different parts of England. I think one lived in Wales, obviously, because, you know, like Barry and Essex, and then it's just about their relationship and how they kind of deal with it long distance. But again, just the chemistry between all the main actors is brilliant. You can't imagine anyone else playing any of the main 4 roles, and even like Gavin's parents and Gwen and like Bryn, just everyone is cast perfectly. In England, it's an iconic show. It's one of the best British sitcoms ever. It's hilarious, it's heartfelt. The drama's really good. It starts off like as a straight out comedy, and as it goes along it gets a bit more dramatic. There are 3 seasons of it. It never loses the comedy, but it does kind of delve into like deeper, more serious issues. And I believe they're bringing it back now for a season 4, which I think it finished about 10 years ago. Even though I love it loads, I don't really want a 4th season, because it was one of those things, it was very of its time. I feel like if they were to bring it back, I can't see it capturing the same thing, because it was so like lightning in a bottle. It was just perfect. 3 seasons, great story, ended at the right time, and it kind of, I don't know if it's a cash grab or what. I mean, I know that the demand is there from the audience. Like, they did a Christmas special last year, which a lot of people watched. I personally wasn't a big fan of the Christmas special, but I feel like Gavin and Stacey should just be left alone at this point. But Gavin and Stacey is brilliant. I don't even know if it would translate to an American audience. There is a difference between British comedy and American comedy, and I honestly don't know if this would play well to an American audience or not, but I'll be really interested to find out. So if you're American and you watch Gavin and Stacey, whether you loved it or hated it, please let me know, because I genuinely don't know how it would translate. Alright, number 6, we've got a very recent show, The Mandalorian, and again, this is one that could climb a couple of places. If it's still on, you know, if it goes for 5-6 seasons, this could really get into like the upper echelons of this list. But The Mandalorian is just everything I love about Star Wars. It's the best Star Wars content we've had since the original trilogy, or since Empire Strikes Back even, I would say. It's the best Star Wars content in 40 years. The world building is there. It's a slow, you know, you look at the new trilogy, and one of the big issues with it is that they clearly didn't have a plan. They rushed it, they chopped and changed what they were doing, they brought in all these different directors that weren't in cohesion with each other. But with this, you've got Jon Favreau, who kind of oversees it all. He's like the Kevin Feige of The Mandalorian. There's a plan, they're slow, but they're deliberate. Like the first season, so I'm up to date with it. My girlfriend's currently on season 1, and she's saying it's slow, not in a bad way, but she said it's slower than she expected. But that's the thing, it starts off slow and it gradually ramps up and it gathers momentum. But the slowness is what's good about it, I think, because it just takes its time. It's just about being in this world and exploring these new characters. You know, with the movies, it's always been about Jedi and Sith and stormtroopers and stuff like that, but Mandalorian is an element of Star Wars that's never really been explored on TV or film. Maybe it has in the graphic novels. I've never read Star Wars graphic novels, so I wouldn't know. But yeah, it's just, I love it. And you know, it's getting to the point now where, because it was very episodic before, which I was fine with and I still really liked it, but now it's getting to the point where you've got some big things coming into play. I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who's not up to date. But yeah, it's getting really good now. The last couple of episodes have been really good, like 2 of the best episodes ever. And the 2 episodes left of this season, I'm sure, are going to just blow people out of the water. And I'm really excited to see where it goes. But I just love the vibe. It feels like classic Star Wars. It really feels like the original trilogy, but it also has vibes of the prequels and vibes of the new. It kind of, I can't imagine any Star Wars fan, no matter whether you like the sequel trilogy, the prequel trilogy, or the original trilogy, I can't imagine that you wouldn't like The Mandalorian, because it kind of encompasses the best bits of all of it while also feeling like its own thing. It's very low down the ground. There's not really Jedi and Sith. There's not a lot of like saving the galaxy or anything like that. It's just this story about a bounty hunter who's questioning his faith. He's just going on missions, like weekly episodic missions, and then gradually bigger things start to come into play. It just is so like laser focused. It knows exactly what it's doing. They do have loads of different directors, like Jon Favreau's done some, Taika Waititi's done some. Bryce Dallas Howard directed one of the best episodes I've seen, which I was skeptical about because I don't believe she's directed before. I could be wrong on that, but I don't think Bryce Dallas Howard's directed before. And I was really just thinking like, oh, I don't know, like should we have a first time director on a show this big? But her episode was one of the best episodes yet. Jon Favreau clearly knows what he's doing. Dave Filoni as well, he's doing a great job. They're bringing elements from Clone Wars and from graphic novels, and it's just all coming together. And I think it's the first time I've seen Star Wars fans be like united on something for, well, probably in my existence, I guess. Maybe The Force Awakens when that first came out. But yeah, I'm loving this. There's no division. Everyone just unanimously loves it, and I can't wait to see where it goes. Number 5 is going to be Daredevil, another show that was cut off a bit early. We did get 3 seasons of Daredevil, which is good, but I still want more. Daredevil is just, I think personally, after The Dark Knight, Daredevil might be the best superhero property yet. I've not seen season 2 of The Boys. If season 2 is as good as, or a little bit better than season 1, that could take it. But for now, Daredevil is probably the second best superhero content out there after The Dark Knight, in my opinion. I think the fight scenes are ridiculously good. The stunts, the long takes, the storytelling is great, whether it's the lore stuff during the day with Foggy and Karen, or whether it's the actual, you know, fighting crime at night and the action side of it. They're balanced well, and they're both just done so well, really executed well. It's really well directed. It's got one of the best villains ever in Wilson Fisk. Film-wise, there are better villains, like Heath Ledger's Joker and Darth Vader's more iconic, although I would argue that Wilson Fisk's more interesting than Darth Vader. Just a classic example of everyone's on the same page, they cast all the right people. I don't think anyone even expected this to be good, because this was the first Netflix show. I don't think people really knew what to expect. Daredevil, at the time that this show came out, what people thought of when they thought of Daredevil was the Ben Affleck movie, or what I thought of was, I had like a cartoon VHS called called Spider-Man versus Daredevil. That was what I thought of, and who knew that Daredevil could be such a deep, well-written, interesting character. And you know, like Wilson Fisk's one of those villains where not only is he interesting and layered and menacing and everything you want in a villain, but it's the first time in a long time that I saw a villain I was like, I genuinely can't understand how our hero is going to defeat this villain. Like, you know, you can't fucking go to the police about him because he owns the police. You put him in prison, he just pays his way out, or he knows the right people to get him. Like, how do you beat a villain like that? Not going to ruin it in case you haven't seen it, but it's really good. And then going into season 2, Elektra and Punisher in particular. Punisher is another brilliant villain, or more of an anti-hero, I suppose you could say. And then season 3, it's Bullseye, you know, Poindexter, just all these characters, they work so well. Even Claire, the kind of love interest for Daredevil, I loved her. Just, yeah, every character is relevant again, every character is well written, it's well shot, the music's great, and the action scene, I mean, I think episode 3 of season 1, it has like a 3 or 4 minute one-take fight scene in a hallway, which is at this point iconic. They outdid that in season 2 with a stairwell fight where it kind of went down all these layers, and it was probably even better. And in season 3 they did an 11-minute one-take fight scene which had dialogue in between and like various different fights, and it's just, but it's not gimmicky, it's not for the sake of it, it just works, it just fits so well with the show. You know, I am sad that it finished at season 3, but at the same time it ended on a good note. There isn't a bad season. Season 2 is the worst season, and I'd probably still give season 2 a 7.5 maybe out of 10, maybe even an 8. And it's just brilliant. It's a great show, and if you like superhero stuff, but you're not, say if you're more like, oh, I don't know, I like the more realistic stuff like Batman Begins and that type of stuff, I would definitely recommend Daredevil. And while we're talking about it, Jessica Jones and Punisher as well. All right, and number 4, this is one that I can almost guarantee our American audience won't have seen. It's called The In-Betweeners. It's a British show. Every British person watching this right now is like, yeah, The In-Betweeners, of course. But I don't think American people know The In-Betweeners. They did a pilot episode, I believe, an American version of it, and it was dreadful. But The In-Betweeners is just one of those things. It's such a product of its time. Like, I grew up, so this show came out when I was 12 and it aired till I was 14, which is the perfect time because it's about these guys in high school, these 4 friends. It's just about them going through high school, trying to get laid. It sounds quite generic, but it is the quintessential high school British experience. Like, it is so incredibly realistic. I've never seen a more realistic depiction of high school ever in a TV show or a movie. That is my exact fucking experience of high school. If you're American and you don't know what I'm talking about, the best way I can kind of describe it is, imagine if Superbad was a TV series. Like, I think Superbad is kind of like the American version of The In-Betweeners. It's crude, but it's realistic, and it's hilarious, and it's just, honestly, it is one of the funniest shows ever, and it's iconic. There are so many iconic lines from it. The characters are all iconic, and while I'm talking about In-Betweeners, I've got a show that you might like. It's on Netflix in the UK called White Gold. It's written by the same guys, Ian Morris and David Beasley. It stars Jay from The In-Betweeners and Simon from The In-Betweeners, and it's a really good show. There's only 2 seasons of it, another one that was cancelled early, and honestly it could have been an honourable mention if it had gone for a bit longer. But yeah, if you love The In-Betweeners, watch White Gold, and if you haven't seen The In-Betweeners, check it out. Like I say, again, like Gavin and Stacy, I'm not 100% sure if an American audience would appreciate it, and I also think you have to be the right sort of age. I think if you watch it for the first time now and you're in your 20s or 30s, I don't know how much you connect with it, but I was about 14, 15 when I watched it, and it was the perfect age to watch it. I was in high school, everyone in my high school would quote it. Me and my friends still quote it on like a daily basis now, like genuinely. For the last, 10 plus years since me and my friends watched it, we still quote it on a daily basis. It's that good. And it will just always have like a special place in my heart because it's The In-Betweeners. It's just amazing. At number 3, it's Spaced. Now, I've mentioned Spaced before on the channel. If you haven't seen Spaced, again, it's another British sitcom. Directed by Edgar Wright, starring Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, written by Simon Pegg and Jessica Stevenson. It's about a bunch of 20-somethings living in this flat, trying to navigate life in London and adulthood, and it's sort of a stoner comedy. It's not really about anything, it's almost like a hangout show, but it's just so well directed. You've seen Simon Pegg and Nick Frost in Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz and stuff, you know how good their chemistry is. They got better chemistry than fucking Walter White and Jesse Pinkman, for God's sake. I don't know how Edgar Wright was this good at directing when I think he was like 22 or 23 when he directed this show, and he's fucking brilliant. And there's a zombie episode which is totally a precursor to Shaun of the Dead. They said that when they made the episode, that's how they knew that they wanted to do a zombie movie, because he just loved directing that episode. There's the whole like thing of Spaced as well is that it's kind of all about pop culture and movie references, which you see that all the time now. Like you see Lord and Miller do it, and you see all these comedy, even like the MCU, they'll always reference movies. But back when this came out, that wasn't really a thing. But even then, it's not the same type of referencing movies. They don't just say, "Oh, that's like Back to the Future." They kind of, the story goes in directions or creates moments which you'll recognise from films, but no one ever says it. No one ever says, "Oh, that's like Pulp Fiction," or "That's like this movie." It just happens, and if you get the reference, you get it. But if you don't get it, you're none the wiser. Like, it still works for the story in the moment, but if you've seen it, it's just a nice little Easter egg. You go, "Oh, that's from that movie, that's cool." So yeah, and also, fun fact, in the commentary for Spaced, they say something about it being a slice of fried gold, which then they obviously reuse again in the movie Shaun of the Dead. So this channel is obviously called Fried Gold, and that's where it originally came from the commentary track for Spaced. There's also 2 really good commentary tracks for Spaced. There's one with Kevin Smith and Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg, and there's one with Quentin Tarantino and Edgar Wright. So watch those as well as the show. But yeah, brilliant show. Can't recommend Spaced enough. Right, number 2, this is going to be contentious for sure, but it's Family Guy. I know now it's kind of cool to hate on Family Guy and people say it's gone downhill, and it has gone downhill a bit, but I still watch it all the time. Like, if a new season comes out, I'm watching it. Family Guy is one of those shows for me where I don't think I've ever seen an episode that didn't make me laugh. It's just so consistently funny for me. And yeah, the early, like maybe the first like 10 to 14 seasons or something, they are prime Family Guy, and it is, you know, the humour is more edgy and it is just kind of funnier then. It's a lot darker and more kind of brutal, the humour there. And I feel like now I feel like Brian's a bit of a mouthpiece for Seth MacFarlane and his political views, and I feel like they're trying to be a bit like relevant and stuff all the time now. But back in its prime, Family Guy was just the funniest show, man. Like, now you're probably looking at things like South Park, and obviously Rick and Morty's massive and stuff, and people sort of dropped off Family Guy a bit, but you've got to remember, for about 15 years, Family Guy was like the new Simpsons, and for me personally, while I don't think it's at its peak, I still rate it a lot higher than most people do. And Family Guy, that is one of those shows where I can just stick on an episode at any time. It will guaranteed make me laugh. It's quite a feel-good show for me. It's very easy to watch. They've started doing this thing recently where the writers have even come out and said that they sometimes just don't like have enough story to fill the runtime, because basically Seth MacFarlane works on all these other things now. He's got other shows and movies that he works on. So basically they'll just, say if they need to make up a minute or two, they'll just do like a stupidly long joke, so with comedy there are phases, and you can do a joke and it's funny, and then it gets to the point where it's not funny anymore, and then it goes on for so long that it becomes hilarious, and that's great. But Family Guy take it beyond that even, and they just get to the point where it's so played out and it's actually like a chore to sit through. And they do that quite a lot now, and the fact that they've admitted that it's just to pad out the runtime, I hate that. And I feel like Seth MacFarlane doesn't have as big a hand in it as he used to. He definitely has a team of writers, and I don't think he is as involved as he used to. Obviously he does a lot of the voices and he's still involved in it, but I feel like it used to be his brainchild, and I feel like now he's kind of more in the back seat of it. But yeah, Family Guy, I just love it. Alright, number 1, another show that's cool to hate now for some reason is Friends. Friends is my favourite TV show of all time. I've seen Friends literally more times than I can count. It's the kind of show, I only watched it for the first time about 2 years ago, and I watched the entire show in the space of like a month, and then I watched it again and I watched it again, and I just haven't stopped watching it. Like if I'm doing anything, if I'm doing housework, I'll stick Friends on. If I'm kind of debating going to sleep, you know, like sometimes you get into bed, you just scroll on your phone, you're like, if I fall asleep, I fall asleep, and if I don't, I don't. If I'm in one of those moods, I just stick Friends on. I can quote pretty much every episode. Some elements of Friends, I'll admit, haven't aged brilliantly. There are certain things in it to do with race or homophobia that don't, you know, they don't hold up brilliantly, but at the same time, you know, it came out like, what, 25 years ago? You can't hold everything to today's standards if it came out 25 years ago. But yeah, Friends, again, it's funny. That's the thing, I don't even think it's like the funniest show. I'd say The In-Betweeners is funnier than this. I'd say Family Guy's funnier. There are a few shows on this list that are funnier than Friends, but it's what my dad calls hangover TV, you know? It's just easy, it's just light and breezy, and it's just nice to watch. You just stick it on. Like, I could watch Friends literally all day. I pretty much do watch Friends all day, every day. It's just so easy to watch, and all the characters I love. I love Chandler Bing, I love Joey Tribbiani. I even surprisingly like Rachel Green a lot. Like, in the early seasons of the show, she's this spoiled brat, but over the course of the show, I think she has the best character out. Like, she becomes like laid back and quite cool, and certainly by like the second half of the show, I really like Rachel a lot. Obviously, Ross and Rachel's dynamic is the will they, won't they relationship. As far as I'm concerned, I know people talk about Cheers, and there are other shows that have done it as well, but Ross and Rachel, it's the most iconic TV couple ever, isn't it? It's got to be. So yeah, it is funny. It's not the most hilarious show ever, but it's funny. It's just nice to watch. It's got drama in there. There are certain storylines in there that are so feel good. It makes me cry as well. Like, the ending makes me cry. There are certain bits, like the whole storyline where Phoebe has her brother's babies. If you haven't seen Friends, it's not how it sounds. Surrogate mother doesn't fuck her brother. Bars. That's just such like a wholesome, heartwarming story. And there are certain other ones like that. Like, there are love stories and more dramatic stories in there. And yeah, I don't know. Friends just captures a time for me. Like, the 90s, it was a simpler time. Like, Jennifer Aniston's even gone on record and said that they couldn't really remake Friends today because friends don't just sit around and hang out all the time now. They're all on their phones and they'd be on social media, and it just kind of represents a simpler time when people weren't surrounded by technology. And, you know, I love 90s and 90s references, and there's so many guest actors in there as well. And they're all like 90s actors and people that were big in the 90s. Some of them are still big now, but you've got people like George Clooney, Robin Williams, Brad Pitt, Billy Crystal, Bruce Willis, Ben Stiller. There are so many more. Like, I couldn't sit here and name them all because there are just too many. But it's full of celebrity cameos. There are loads of episodes that I love. One of my favourite episodes of TV ever is the one where everyone finds out. I just love Friends. I just love it. So yeah, that's my list. That's my top 10 favourite TV shows of all time. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to click the notification bell. I've got a few videos coming up. I know it's been a long time since my last video. I am really sorry about that. There's been all these things getting in the way. But yeah, I've got a few videos lined up. So click the notification bell, subscribe if you've liked it, drop a like on the video and comment if you've enjoyed it. It genuinely does help the video out. It genuinely does help the video out. And thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.